As requested by the Guild, I'm going to take a look at the campaigns of the French Foreign Legion. This is from Strategy and Tactics issue number 200, I think. Yep, it's hard to read on this cover. Number 200. You can barely see the title there amongst the fairly busy picture. It's kind of cool artwork, but in typical S&T style, they don't know how to do fonts or graphical composition in any way. So you end up with this kind of mess of a cover. Also in typical S&T fashion, as I've learned going through the rules are littered with typos, missing rules, like completely missing rule sections. One chart was missing completely. There's this, you're supposed to be able to offload giant stacks onto a column chart, and as you can see here, you put your guys in a column box and then put the column chit out there to show where the giant stack is. But there was no column chart, so I just had to write my own on a scrap of notebook paper. So this basically sums up your average S&T publication game here. Nobody proofed the rules. They're full of typos. And plenty of errata. Apparently, the major errata was on each of the counters, which have, if I can find one that's not an actual headquarters or something, each of the counters has a letter designation on it, and that's the weapon type. Well, apparently the weapon types on the counters are completely different than the weapon types listed here. You can see here you've got like ML, RML, BL, MBL. None of those appear on the counters, so the errata had to provide a translation of, oh, okay, here's what the letters should have been on the counter. Like, this is just some epic level crap, basically. Just not proofing. How would you end up with an oversight this massive? I mean, obviously this was just not play tested at all, because nobody would have been able to play it during playtesting. They would have been like, well, none of these letters on these counters match anything on this chart. So clearly nobody playtested it, which from what I've read is probably the case anyway, given that these scenarios are not at all balanced. By the way, you can see here how I've kind of got two maps overlapped over each other. That's because the charts in the game are all on the Tonkin map, along with the battle areas, which is you're supposed to use these battle areas to sort out all of your units, because all of your units will fire in groups based on their weapon type. So, all your rifled units will fire together, all your artillery units will fire together, and then by class too, like all your veteran units, all of your line units, all of your rabble units, and so forth. So the battle areas are so you can sort a giant stack of units out so that each separate class of unit can fire on its own. And so you end up marking your battle on the map with one of these battle symbols, or actually the battle chit there. So, but of course, the Algiers map, which is what I'm starting with here, which is this one, which also has the Dahomey, I think, is the Dahomey, is this other battle. A smaller battle here uses this smaller map. But this map did not have any of the charts on it, and there are no charts in the manual. So all the charts are on this other map. So you got to kind of, fix your maps together, and then your sequence of play is up here, and that chart, it doesn't, like the fold cuts off the end of the sequence of play chart. So if you want the whole sequence of play on there, you can't fold it along the natural fold of the map, which would make sense, that you just fold it over and have this laying next to the board. No, if you want the whole sequence of play on there, you have to lay the whole map out and just kind of do this thing where I did it and put half the map underneath the other map. So, just an all in all, just total hash of this publication as far as I'm concerned. I haven't even started playing yet. Already all kinds of problems. So well, I'm going to give it a try. And, I've got a loose setup here that I don't know. This is the invasion of Algiers in 1830. It's the first scenario in the game. Apparently the French can win it in about 2 turns. So we will see what happens. I don't know if this is historical or not. I just landed 3 French columns. There's unlimited stacking per hex in the game, so you can just put your entire force. I mean, that's pretty big for all those guys. So you can put all these units together and invade with them. Like per column. You don't have to spread them out all along the coast. So anyway, they're about to land. I'm going to blow up some Algerian fortresses, and I'll come back with how this turns out. Okay, and as I suspected, I just finished turn 3 here of 1830, which is the May-June turn. And as expected, the French romped fairly easily. You can see they eliminated every single Algerian unit that was on the board. And they did take some casualties in taking Algiers. The artillery table is very punishing. So if you have really any points at all on that FMA column there, you can see. And usually, with the French, I'd have 6, maybe even as high as 10 when I was using the fleet. If you roll high, and I did, I got a modified 8 roll because I had veteran units and a leader there. You're looking at 14 casualties. Now, per the rules, that's 14 units, not steps, not combat factors, but actual units. And the Algerians barely had 14 units on the entire map. So, one good roll with artillery, and it's all over. So like for Algiers, I just never even got to the infantry rifle phase. It was just done in the artillery fire phase, which is the first fire phase. So the only thing that really helped the Algerians was that they consistently rolled higher on the tactical superiority table, which was a plus. You add your tactical value of your leader there. And I just rolled really low. The French typically had better leaders, but I rolled really low with them on most of their tactical superiority rolls, which means that the Algerians got to fire first during each phase. So the Algerians did get to fire first with their artillery, which had an effect on the French. The problem is that the French artillery, when it returned fire, it killed every single unit that the Algerians had. Now, the Algerians were in fortresses, but I had 2 or 3 engineers with each French column. And those engineers get to do a pre-combat, what they call a sapper roll, to see if they blow those defenses. Because ordinarily, in a fortress, the French should be rolling against a -3 modifier, which would cancel out, their commander plus veteran troops modifier on their combat rolls. Usually they'd be at a +3. So they're attacking with a +1 French leader and veteran troops, which are a +2 DRM. That'd be a +3. But if you're hitting a fortress, it's a -3, so it'd be a wash. So it ended up that the French engineers would cancel that out and end up giving the French that full +3 DRM. So when their artillery would roll at a +3, ended up getting that 8 roll, and bam, 14 units, or whatever it is, and something in the teens dead. That's every unit that the Algerians have. So there's no melee phase, there's no rifle phase. I did hear, and maybe it wasn't in Algeria, I think it was over here in this fortress, Bone, I guess. I don't know if it's Bonnet or if it's an Arabic pronunciation. But anyway, the Fortress of Bone. There, I had some back and forth, and had lost a couple of French units there. As you can see, I took supply. That's one of the sort of gamey things you can do, is take your losses in supply units. But I also had to end up losing a couple of French line infantry, because we made it through several rounds there. There wasn't a lot of French artillery, and the French artillery didn't roll as well, so that went for a few rounds. And maybe it wasn't, actually, I think it was here at Constantine, because this is where I went first, because it's worth more victory points. Yeah, I was here at Constantine, which had a larger force, and the French took some losses there, but ultimately it was inconsequential to them just taking everything. So there's like, and so at the beginning of a return you roll an events phase, and there's a pretty substantial events chart. I mean, you can see this is a whole page, dense with text of events. A number of them don't apply to this 1830 scenario. They're for later scenarios, or like the Tonkin or Dahomey scenarios that are fought, the battles that are fought later. But there are potential in here. There's potential in here for the Algerians to roll specific reinforcements, and so they can bring in, if they get the right rolls, they can bring in a bunch of reinforcements here. But that didn't happen. So it's really contingent upon them getting a substantial reinforcement roll to have any chance in this scenario. And even with that, I think there's very little chance. So this is almost just sort of a pro forma scenario. It's like, hey, this happened historically. We're showing you the French military actions in Algeria in the early 19th century. This is just included because, hey, this was kind of part of all those Algerian wars. This was the initial invasion of Algeria, which the French did to try and cut back on the piracy that was emanating off the coast of North Africa in 1830. And eventually it creates this jihadist militia that fights back in an 1840 scenario, and I think there's a third one, maybe an 1844 scenario. Let me see in the scenarios. So I did the 1830, which was, on to Algiers, very easy. The second scenario is called Desert Hawks, and that is the 1840, runs from 1840 until 1844. And is there a third? No, that's the set. So that's the one that deals with the sort of Algerian guerrilla uprisings, and probably has more actual engagement between the forces. It's not so one-sided. Although what I've read is that they're all pretty one-sided. This one was, the 1831 was more one-sided than most. Dahomey is in West Africa. That's 1892, so you're jumping way ahead here when you move over to this scenario, which, as you can see, is probably mostly focused on these coastal cities, as your colonial actions typically were. And then Tonkin is the invasion of North Vietnam. That's 1884 and 85. So that one we'll get to eventually as well. I will probably do, I don't know if I'll jump just to the Dahomey scenario or revisit the Algiers. The Algiers ones are kind of the centerpiece of the game, because it was Algiers where the French Foreign Legion got its start, got its sort of legend began. But the Dahomey scenario, which is in West Africa, that's actually what this picture on the front is from the Dahomey. So I may just jump right to that one, just to see what that one's like, because I know a little bit about the Algerian uprising and the actions of France in Algiers. I know nothing at all about this Dahomey one. So and then I know a little bit about the French issues in Vietnam, But the Tonkin one would probably be interesting too, just because that has some wider political implications by the point that it takes place, which are reflected in the random events chart, so or historical events chart. So I'll figure out what's next, and we'll go from there.